welcome back. It's me, Kayla. So as you can tell by the title, today I'm going to be talking about the movie Desperados that just came out on Netflix. And before I get super into that, I wanted to do a couple of smaller drive-by opinions because I also recently watched Expecting Amy, the little docuseries on HBO Max, and I would highly recommend to anybody because even if you don't like her, which I do, I love her, so don't ever get that twisted. But I mean, obviously there are a lot of people out there who have different opinions, so if you're not her biggest fan at this point, this show gives you such a different view of her, and I already liked her, but I have such a strong newfound respect for her. So yeah, I would definitely recommend watching that. And I also just finished the Jeffrey Epstein Filthy Rich, and I really thought about doing a whole episode or whatever just based on that, but physically and emotionally I can't, because it's just gonna be probably 15 hours of me saying he's trash and I hate him. It's well made, and before any of this happened, when he died in real life, I was like, oh, he died. I knew that he was kind of up in Trump's circle of people, I guess, but I literally did not know a single thing about him. I did not know that he had $400 billion just sitting in his fucking safe at home. And it is sorry, okay, I got cut off because my brother decided to come downstairs and then 2 days passed, so here I back am. But yeah, the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing is just so physically frustrating, and no matter what side of the argument you're on, you're gonna be annoyed. But I do think that it's such an important topic, so I would still obviously recommend watching it because, first of all, you can never be too educated. Get out there and get all different sources of information, because in that way you can have, an educated opinion on however you feel. And I mean, like I said before, it is well made. It's a good production. It's edited well, whatever. It's just, I mean, it is what it is. There's really not much else I can say about it because it just is frustrating. Anyway, I'm going to deviate because that's not what I'm here for today. So, like I said before, I am going to be focusing on the movie Desperados, that just came out on Netflix. So, alright, the IMDb thing says, a panicked young woman with her reluctant friends in tow rushes to Mexico to try and delete a ranting email she sent to her new boyfriend. So, yeah, it's basically one of those, she's a crazy girlfriend, but she doesn't want him to know that, so she drags her friends along for this crazy trip so that she can fix the mistakes that she made and pretend that she's still perfect. But what really got me interested in this is I really love the cast. So it stars Nasim something. I'm not going to pronounce her last name because I've done a lot of research online to try and figure out how to say it properly, which is kind of an exaggeration. I looked at a couple, 3 different interviews that she had on YouTube, but none of them said her last name, so I'm just going to say Nasim. So she's in it, and Lamorne Morris, and they were both love interests on New Girl, which is one of the best sitcoms to grace television. Winston and Allie are such a sweet couple, and everyone tells me that I'm Winston. I think that I'm Winston because he's my favorite. But anyway, so I was really excited to see to see those two back together and they're like the lead people, and they're also love interests. So that's really what piqued my interest into this. And then I found out that Anna Camp is in this also, and Robbie Amell, which, I mean, no, I don't have anything actually to say about that. Like, he's cool. He's just kind of, he's like, I feel like the kind of actor who's just like there, you know? Like, he's just in things sporadically. But yeah, I don't actually have anything substantial to say about Robbie Amell. So this just came out on July 3rd. It's rated TV MA. I said this before, and I will likely say it again. I don't know why it's not just rated R, because it's not a TV show. It is on a streaming service, so is it not rated the same as a movie? Anybody in the world, please explain this to me, because I just don't get it. Because if I had the choice, I would just say it's rated R. Anyway, so it's rated TV MA for the sake of Netflix, I guess. It is an hour 45 minutes, so not too bad. There are like some movies out there that are legitimately over 2 hours for no reason other than, I guess, like to waste someone's time. I don't know. But no, this actually, it feels like kind of long when you're watching it, or when I'm watching it. I don't know the experiences that you've had. But yeah, so okay. Nasim plays an odd girl named Wesley. Okay, she plays Wesley, and honestly, she's fantastic. Love her. But she just is having a real rough go of it, unfortunately. And I mean, some of it I'm gonna say is like on her, because it opens with her interviewing for a job as a guidance counselor at a Catholic school, and she's sitting there like giving the nun a sex ed course. And I'm like, honey, you really need to know your audience, because regardless of how you feel, like, you have to play to your audience. And I promise you, this nun is not interested in anything you have to say about your downtown, or especially the downtowns of children that you're supposed to be in charge of. But like, if you're that kind of person, don't apply to work at a Catholic school. I mean, for sure they need it the most, because they're obviously behind some times, in my personal opinion. But you're not going to change it that quickly and that drastically, I swear. But yeah, so like, it really just was not cute, and needless to say, she did not get the job. And she's going to hang out with her girlfriends, and they said what we were all saying, like, why did you do that? Like, did you think that through? No? Okay, well, we didn't think so, but that's fine. And she also says something that, I mean, everybody can agree with and feel to some extent, is she's just constantly like comparing herself to everybody. And she is so like down on herself because her friend, I mean, actually, technically, both of her friends are married and have jobs, I guess. That's never actually addressed, but they both act a lot more successful than her, so I'm going to assume that they have jobs. But she keeps like comparing herself to everybody, and I'm like, honestly, you're right, because that's something that every single person has an issue with. But also at the same time, nobody's life is perfect, so actually stop comparing yourself to everybody. And apparently she was like dating this guy who was now ghosting her, and she was like not, I was gonna say she's not having it, but the actual problem is that she was having it. She was giving him, in her words, her undivided attention, because that's like, and I've also heard people say this, like, whenever somebody's not giving you their attention, you crave it more. So the fact that he was not responding to her made her need to talk to him that much more. But then she finally finds out that apparently he's getting engaged, or maybe it was a different ex that is now getting married. I don't know. But yeah, so she finds out that he is getting married, and she like jogs herself to a bookstore and finds their engagement announcement just like fucking centerfold in Elle magazine. I'm like, who are you dating? Like, sure, people can buy out newspaper ads for that kind of stuff, but who and why are you dating that is featured in Us Weekly? That's something that I wish they had paid a little bit more attention to. But yeah, so that like is really kind of like pushes her over the edge, because she's already talking about like her clock is ticking. And I mean, that's kind of how a lot of that's how all women are made to feel. Like, if you are not in a stable relationship and popping out babies by a certain age, then like your uterus is gonna disintegrate. So she feels like super pressured by honestly everyone around her to be in this stable relationship and be good at being an adult. And they like pan around her apartment, and you see she's got like reading materials on freezing her eggs, and she's stealing food from the family she babysits for. And honestly, I feel that. And then a telephone pole crashes her car. So things aren't good, and then they're also not getting better. So after she realizes that her ex is like down for the count, I guess he's no longer a viable option, she decides to reach out to this guy Sean, who is like a friend of a friend that she's supposed to be like calling to get a blind date, whatever. So she's like, you know what, literally what do I have to lose except for eggs at this point? So she calls up Sean. They set up a date for them to hang out in like 10 minutes. On the phone, she kind of like mentions how there's so much pressure when you're starting to like date somebody or whatever. I am not going to act like I know what she's talking about, but especially like with blind dates, I guess. I mean, in all honesty, never could I ever, but when you're at that point, like, go get yours. But she's saying basically like on blind dates, there's a lot more pressure to make it work. I guess because like you're friends of friends, or maybe you're like in the same circle. I don't know. But she's like, well, if you just don't like each other, you should have an automatic out. Like, nope, we're good, bye. So they both get to this place. She shows up and finds him, and like legitimately the first two sentences out of her mouth mention children and marriage. And I think that some people are just at very different points of, or like different sides of that conversation, I guess, because just because she's talking about those concepts doesn't mean that she wants it from you. You know, I feel like in that kind of situation, it's acceptable to assume that most people would be, you know, like dating to do something long term. But I mean, don't be so conceited as to assume that she's trying to like lock you down right now. And he does also say that it's like awkward timing for him, and you find out later why. So like I do kind of understand why those topics would particularly be troublesome for him. But like literally 5 seconds later, he's like, no thanks, like I'm using my out, I will talk to you never, bye. And she's like, well, fuck that. And she has every right to be pissed off, because the way that he goes about it is quite rude. So he basically says, no thanks, see you never, I'm not interested. And she's like, well, I'm not interested first, so goodbye. And walks away. And as she's trying to walk herself home, she like falls and hurts herself. And when she comes to, she's greeted by like a Sasquatch firefighter who, I mean, legitimately is like my love interest of the whole movie. And I wish that they had brought him back at some point. But no, so she obviously is too good for him. So she's like, bye. And Jared shows up, who is Robbie Mel. And in like the first couple times that we meet him, he's not like that bad, but I mean, obviously he's very pretty. That's kind of the point. So they're just like talking. They go to hang out at his apartment. He casually brings up marriage and kids in a way that's not suggesting that he and Wesley have kids after getting married to each other, but just in general mentions that that's someplace that he would like his life to go. So they're kind of like on the same page, and for the first 10 minutes you're like, okay, like maybe that could work. But then she decides to tell her friends like, oh, actually, I'm just going to lie about everything like inside of my personality to make him want to be with me forever. And then I'll just change myself for the rest of my life. And her friends are like, are you sure that's a good idea? And I'm like, no, it's not a good idea. I could tell you for sure. But Wesley's like, no, I've got this. Like, don't even worry about it, because like I'm just going to be a different person. And I relate so hard because her reasoning is, oh, you know, the reasons that my past relationships didn't work out is because I was being too myself. And she calls her personality an acquired taste. And that shit hits because same. Like, I have referred to myself as like a homebrewed beer because it's only gonna be okay for like 2 people, you know? But so kind of like in that way, I like how they touch on like real life problems and stuff that actual people kind of like go through and feel and stuff. So that's what happens. She says like, I'm for sure just going to pretend to be a different person, and then everything's going to be great after that. So they go through this little montage of lies where they're like at dinner and Jared mentions like, oh, I was actually engaged before, but she was like super crazy. Like, is that cool with you? And Wesley's like, yeah, that's fine with me. And he's like, wow, like I'm so impressed at the fact that you didn't freak out, because any other girl would have totally freaked out, and you're super cool for it. And that's what I like about you most. And like, it is just, it's not cute. So it's just like a whole bunch of that shit where she pretends that she's not crazy. She pretends that she's not like they're at a restaurant and they bring over like a bacon wrapped hot dog and she's like, let's go. And he's like, ew, no, thanks. I'll just have a salad. And I'm like, legitimately, you have the personality of a freaking salad. So I love salad. I can't say that. But he's just like limp lettuce. He's so boring. Like after the first night that they hang out, he's like kind of like cool and chill. And then after that, he is just stale. Like he's just a stale tortilla chip. But so then, I don't know, apparently the one day she's like, this is it. Let's just like go for it and do the dippity. So they're back at his apartment and they're doing the damn thing. And she goes through this whole scenario in her mind of them like dating, getting married, having kids, growing old together. And legitimately, they put a lot of like thought and effort into that montage, because that wedding dress is nicer than, I mean, granted, it's a feature film, so like they probably have a larger budget, but like that wedding dress that they got for her fake marriage is nicer than some wedding dresses I've seen on real life people. I was about it. But after that, they finish the damn thing and they separate at some point for her to go back home, and then she just doesn't hear from him for 5 days. And the way that they show the passage of time is they pan over her birth control. So each day that she doesn't hear from him is just another pill that she's got to swallow. So after 5 days later, she's like wine drunk with her friends, which is one of the best places to be, is wine drunk with your friends. And she goes, I'm going to do an email. And it's an interesting choice. I like it for the fact of the movie and editing and the fact that like they have the email like over on the side so you can read everything that they're typing. But like in real life, they've only been dating for a couple of weeks. Do you even have his email address? That's something I did not think about until right now. Like, there are a number of people that I've spent time with in my life for more than just a few weeks. Not in that way, don't be gross. But, like, there are a lot of, like, close friends that I have, and I don't even have their email address. Huh. Very interesting. Okay, I'm glad that I thought about that, because that's curious. So, anyway, she does. She decides to send him an email, and that thing is cringe. It's only bad. Like, she is hitting every single nerve she could think of. And I mean, I conflict with myself internally on legitimately any single opinion in the world, because there's always two sides to every story. So yes, I understand that, like, as soon as they got in and out, he was gone. Like, that sucks. She for sure has reason to be pissed. But does she take it to a different level? Yeah. So she starts it off with like, just so you know, I'm cool. And I think like after that, she probably could have called it quits. But she for sure doesn't. So she brings up his dead dad. And I'm like, girlfriend, I don't think you should bring that up in any situation. But she does. So they bring that up. She says that he has a pencil penis and that her friends hope that he gets like a unicorn tattoo. They hit a lot of different points. But overall, it's just bad. But so they do it. So they type this whole email and they send it off. And then she gets a phone call because he's in Mexico and he got into a huge accident 5 days ago. And they put him into a coma. And she's like, oh, cool. And he's like, oh, really? You don't even care? And I'm like, girlfriend, I get she's not trying to sound crazy, but you should care at least a little bit. Like, even if you're trying to save your, what's the fucking word? Perception? Image, maybe? I don't know. Even though you're trying to continue this facade of being like a cool, like, level-headed chick, you're still allowed to say like, oh, well, you know, it sucked that you disappeared for a few days, but I'm not going to say you should be glad to hear that he's in a coma, but I'm glad to hear that you weren't ghosting me on purpose. But no, she's like, haha, okay, cool, sounds good. And another thing is he mentions for like half a second the resort that he was staying at at this point, I still couldn't even tell you what it was called. Because in that moment, like, how are you paying attention that closely? I've seen this movie twice now, and this second time, I was taking notes for the purpose of talking about it later. And I still have no idea what this place was called, or how you would get there, or where it is, besides Mexico. But she's like, oh yeah, he told me the name of his hotel for half a second, and so let's just go down there. And, her friends obviously are like, do you think that's the best idea? And she definitely thinks it is. And I disagree, but bad decisions are where movies come from. Because if she didn't decide to do this, obviously there wouldn't be a movie. So they fly on down to Mexico. Oh, that's another thing. Okay, first of all, how do they have the money and the freedom to make choices like that? She does not have a job. She lives in Los Angeles, California, in a fanciest apartment by herself. Can anyone discuss this, please? Because, like, I used to have a job. I have income, and I still live with my mom. I mean, granted, I'm not in my 30s, but still, and she's just gonna drop all her shit and leave? And her one friend is trying to get a baby, and that shit's not cheap. And her other friend is about to go through a divorce, which is also not cheap. And do they not have jobs? I asked you this before, but do they not have a job that they have to like take off work? And then they also head down to Mexico and book this fancy ass hotel for however many days that they feel like going to stalk this guy. I digress. But yeah, so they go to Mexico. They hit up this resort. She has a run-in with a 12-year-old, which just comes back to haunt her the whole time. And we find out that Sean is there, which is curious because how and why. But he is there for a different purpose. Genuinely, who knows? But it's funny because she's like, no, I'm not actually stalking you because I'm stalking somebody else. And he like mentioned them spending time or like hanging out or something to do something. And she's like, nope, bye. Because that's what he did to her. And I'm like, yes, girl, put him in his place. So what does that mean? I don't know what that means that I wrote down. But it's super fancy. I've never taken a trip to Mexico, but I can only assume that it would be like super expensive, and especially the type of resort that they're staying at. Like those rooms are basically like $1 million condos in some type of city. So her choice at this point, I mean, she didn't have a lot of good ones to choose from, but the one that she ultimately went with is they're gonna just walk around the place and call his phone and wait to hear it ring in his room. And something else I just thought of for the first time. He has been in a coma for 5 days. On what planet, and also let me know what plan he is on, that his phone still has charge after 5 days in a foreign country, and she calls him 197 times? What the fuck? 197 international phone calls. That's all. That is super expensive. Not only are they paying for this whole ass last minute trip, but now she's using her roaming data. Well, that's not data, but like roaming phone calls. But so she's walking around the resort and she finally thinks that she hears his phone ringing in one of the rooms. So their plan is to have her dressed in only a tail and try to convince somebody to let her into this room. This is so frustrating for me because to an extent, I know in my heart that they're only doing this for the sake of the movie, but it is so, like, flabbergasting that a person, like a human being, would decide to do that. Like, if that's your choice, go ahead, but, like, wrap a tail around yourself and leave your unders on. Like, if you're going to give the illusion that you're naked, have the illusion that you're naked. And then they just, like, toss her clothes off to the side and say, hey, like, we'll leave them here, after you delete the email. I never even explained that. What am I? So, yeah, after she finds out that he was in a coma, her idea is to go to Mexico to his place to steal his technology and, like, get in somewhere because he told her on the phone that all of his stuff was still in his room. So her plan is just to go down to Mexico, get into his room, and delete the email before he has the chance to read it. So now that I can stop pretending that I actually know what I'm doing. But yeah, so she hears his phone ringing in this room, and they, like, toss her clothes off to the side and say, like, hey, we'll leave them here. When you're done with your plan, get dressed in this bush and come meet us for drinks. So she convinces this guy who already hates her because of the run-in she had with this 12-year-old. She convinces him to let her into the room. And so she's, like, guy went all over the place trying to find his stuff, find his like laptop and stuff, and the stupid freaking 12-year-old is there. And it's his room. And so he obviously is like, oh my god, she came back for me, she loves me. And his mom is a psycho. She is loose as a freaking goose. And that's, like, she legitimately is one of the parents that thinks that her child can do no wrong. Because her son is actively pursuing a currently naked 30-something-year-old woman. Like, does that not beg the question that he has issues? Like, I promise you, your kid is not perfect. But she really does think so. Wesley is honestly trying. She is trying so hard. And it's like literally nothing is just happening for her. And she realizes that the issue she has is she heard his phone ringing in the room above that one. So she just hits the wrong room, which is rough, but she doesn't have the capabilities to explain that to anyone because the kid's trying to have sex with her and the mom is trying to kill her. So she's like running away, still naked, and steals, because her clothes got picked up by somebody because they were literally just sitting on a curb. And one of the people who works at this fanciest resort is like, oh, we can't have a random person's clothing just sitting here because it like disrupts the look of our whole place. So let me get rid of them. And so her clothes are gone and she's running around the resort with like a lounge chair pad, just covering herself, kind of, mostly. So she runs, and simultaneously her friends, Brooke and Kaylee, are at like the hotel bar trying to get drinks, and Brooke, bless her, is the one that will eventually end up going through a divorce, but she like hasn't gotten hers in a while, and everybody is just trying to be supportive, like, you know what, meet somebody, talk to someone. And so they go over to this table with these two guys, and the one that I guess they're pretending is like an option for Brooke is like a deflated tire. He, first of all, looks like a Wee Me character because his face is just a rectangle, and his personality is like a bed sheet that somebody burnt with an iron. Like, in the sense that he started off with like just so plain, but then it only was made worse because he is just trash. He's like a used condom that somebody put into the garbage disposal. And then he's also wearing man sandals, and he's talking about how his job is creating essentially Viagra. And I'm like, hun, you should not really be advertising the fact that you use those because it kind of makes people think that you need them, and that's not cute. So he is all bad, and Brooke could do and does do much better. So everyone all around is having a terrible time, except for Kaylee, who found her new best friend in one of those guys who presents himself flamboyantly, but we don't actually get much information on him, except I love him. He's great. So things don't go well, to say the least. Wesley runs through the bar with her lounge pad on to collect her friends and say, hey, come help me fix these problems. But then the mom and the child are both there, and everything is just like an explosion of bad. So they go back to the room, they regroup. The next day, Brooke and Kaylee are like, well, we solved your problem because we're going to go paddleboarding, and the guy who has like a master key to all the rooms is like the paddleboard instructor, so we'll just steal the key. Duh. So that's our plan for the day. So they go to the beach, and Wesley's the only one who's allowed to paddleboard, and Sean shows up once again. And he is like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love him. He's like super cool, but he is the one that told her no to begin with. And then after that, she ended up at the same resort. I obviously know that it wasn't to stalk him, but could he be crazy enough to assume that it was? Sure. Anyway, he's being like super friendly, and like maybe he feels bad because of what he did, but it's an odd mixture. So they end up going paddleboarding together. So it's just the two of them. They go out and they're paddling along, and then they end up at this like little kind of like dock type deal in the middle of a body of water. Could be an ocean, but genuinely I have no idea. But it's like man-made, and I don't know, it's like a really cool little setup. But I'm curious, like there's a whole group of paddleboarders with this resort. Like, why don't they get to play on the dock too? But they don't, so it's literally just Wesley and Sean hanging out. And I can't. So when they're hanging out on this dock, inexplicable things happen with a dolphin. I completely refuse to get into detail. If that is something that you're interested in, you can go and watch it for yourself. But I just can't, and I won't. So, after whatever happens with this dolphin, she's a bit shaken up, as I hope we all would be. And there's like, it probably got juices on her. It's gross. But it definitely brings the shock factor. It's definitely something different that I've never seen in a movie before. So I guess kudos to you. But like, the way that she reacts to it is like the dolphin juices are like poison, or I don't know, make her sick. She ends up like passing out, and then this 12-year-old is trying to give her mouth to mouth, and actually he is like kind of assaulting her, and she has made it widely known she's not interested, and his mom still blames Wesley. I'm like, girl, put your kid on a freaking leash, because I promise he is the problem. He is your one and only problem in this entire freaking country. You need to fix him. But no, she thinks it's Wesley's fault, as she's literally laying on the ground gasping for air. And then Wesley gets kicked off the resort. Her and her friends are made to leave. And also, something that, I mean, like I said before, I've never gone. I was on a cruise that docked in Mexico, so I only saw like touristy Mexico. But any movie or any kind of like portrayal on TV about Mexico is like very two completely polar opposites. So I personally am just like kind of curious how that holds up to real life, or kind of like what the country overall is like, because they show places like this resort which are like hoity-toity, like only the expensive can afford to visit, and then they kind of show the kind of like grungier areas, like more middle class, maybe like lower middle class. And I feel comfortable enough to say that because I myself am like a lower middle class, so please don't come for me. But yeah, so like anytime that I see a movie or a TV show that involves Mexico, it's either like super rich and fancy, or it's like kind of at the lower end of the spectrum. So that has pretty much no bearing on the plot, but something that ran through my mind, and I guess I decided needed to be said out loud. So they get kicked out of this resort, and they end up going to this, I don't know, I guess cheaper area. It kind of looks like the room that they end up staying in, to me, automatically made me think of in Zootopia, when the bunny is going off to work in Zootopia and she has to like live in this little kind of like rectangle, or I guess, okay, a dorm room is kind of what I could say. Because it's just like a single room, there's a bed, and then that's just like all your stuff is just in one spot. But yeah, it automatically made me think of Zootopia when the little bunny is off to live on her own. And like, Wes and her friends are not doing too well right now. Her friends realize how far off the deep end she has flown. But Wesley is like still choosing to ignore that. And so they still have the master key that they took from this guy on the beach. So Wesley's like, I mean, we're already here. We already got kicked out of the hotel. We already got in trouble. He already hates us. Like, why not try to at least make it work out, you know? So she goes by herself back to this hotel and is trying to climb over the fence to get into it as if it's like a freaking prison, because it's just like all a brick wall with electric wire over it. Like, they're honestly doing everything that they should be doing to keep people out, and she just can't have it. She can't. And it's like genuinely difficult to watch because she literally throws herself through these electric wires just to delete this freaking email. And I'm like, girlfriend, he is not that great. Like, at what point do you realize that is not meant to be? Like, which hint do you decide to end up taking? Because the email was the first hint. Like, oh, you know what? It sent, and maybe it shouldn't have, but it did. So, like, is that kind of the universe? But then with the room incident where she's naked, and then when she gets assaulted by this dolphin, and now that there's like a freaking shock wire and she got kicked out of the resort, like, pick any one of those hints to take seriously, because this guy's not worth it. You could go back to LA at any point and probably successfully dodge him for the rest of your life. But that's just my 2 cents on how you would deal with this in real life. So she hops the fence. Her hair is blown all the way out. She gets to his room. She breaks in. She gets his computer and stuff, but these people already know she's there. They're banging on the door trying to get in and say, like, girl, you gotta go. And her first instinct is to jump off of the freaking balcony. She is at least on the second floor. No, I think she is actually specifically on the second floor. Girl, you already electrocuted yourself 14 times just to get over that brick wall. But so now you're just gonna jump off a balcony? And what, like break a leg? And then she has his technology with her that she's jumping over, or maybe she didn't. But I mean, realistically, her goal was to have taken it with her. And like, what if the laptop broke? And then legitimately all of this would have been for nothing. Anyway, she jumps off the balcony. The people get into the room, follow her off the balcony, and then she ends up getting arrested. Her friends show up and are like, you're literally going to Mexican jail. Like, what are you doing with your life? And she's like, but the email. And like, we are so far past the email at this point, but that's all she can really keep her mind on. But yeah, so then she ends up, like, I think Sean posts her bail or whatever, so she gets out of Mexican jail, and her friends are like, bye, like, we can't anymore. And they're going off to see this shaman because Kaylee wants to have a baby, and she thinks that this shaman will help her get pregnant. And Brooke, like, honestly just has nothing else for herself in Mexico, and she's less interested in spending her time with Wesley at this point, so she just also goes to see this shaman. But yeah, so then after that, her and Sean decide to hang out, and I guess he's gonna like help her solve her problems. And she finds out that he is actually widowed because he was married for 7 years, and then after his wife passed away, he was like out of the dating scene for 2 years. And his first experience back on the market was Wesley. And so that's why, like, I do also totally understand how, like, her bringing up marriage and kids, like, probably, like, super freaked him out, because he literally was on his first date ever after his wife died. So it was, like, for sure too much for him to handle. But the way he went about it was, like, still kind of a dick move. So they're kind of, like, on each other's side, I guess, more so because, like, the truth is out in the open, and they're about to get... Where did this Jeep come from? I don't know. I guess it's Sean's. Whatever. I will never pretend to have the answer. That's a lie. Sometimes I really do just make things up for the sake of having an answer, but I don't know where this Jeep came from. Did Sean drive himself down to Mexico from home? Did he rent a car? I don't have the answer. So they get into this Jeep and are about to go somewhere. The airport, I guess. I don't know. She gets a phone call from Jared, and he's saying basically like, hey, they're letting me out. I'm about to go to the airport, so come pick me up. And she's like, oh my god, I'm in Mexico. I'll just meet you at the airport and then we can fly home together. First of all, he's literally within stone's throw distance from her on the street. How did she not know where this hospital was? Did she never look it up? I don't know. That is so far away from the point of this plot. So then at the end of the phone call, Jared calls Wesley his girlfriend, and Wesley starts like freaking out, like, oh my god, he just called me his girlfriend for the first time. That's so cute. I'm so happy. I'm like, bitch, what? He's just calling you his girlfriend for the first time, and you got yourself raped by a dolphin and electrocuted and sent to jail, and he only just now DTR'd? Like, where are your standards? Ladies everywhere on the freaking planet, and probably some guys need to hear this too. You are worth more than that. Like, please reevaluate where you think you are on the spectrum of worth, because I promise you it's higher. So yeah, she's like having this whole freaking conniption because he used the word girlfriend. And so Jared gets into a van, and then they put his luggage into a separate van, and she's like, Sean, follow them. The vans split up. And so Sean's like, oh, well, you're obsessed with Jared. Let's go follow him, like meet him at the airport. She goes, follow the freaking bags. Because this really shows you that this whole point is just for her to save her own image. It is not about Jared, or she would have followed him to the airport. No. The whole plot is just for her to make sure she doesn't come off as crazy, because all she cares about is getting rid of that email and the evidence. But then so while they're following the van that has his bags, they like almost get into an accident with a goat, and then the Jeep flips over. And let me tell you that this is such BS, because the car legitimately flips on its side and they just get out and are ready to continue life. Like, I'm sorry. Did she not get electrocuted and jump off a balcony and then get into this huge car accident? And she's like, Sean, help me push it back up. What? How are you not bleeding? How do I not see one of your bones sticking out? Like, maybe they're not going for the reality of the situation. I feel like that could be pretty safe to assume. But no, so she's like, help me flip the car back over. And Sean's like, you're an idiot. That's not happening. So then they just start walking. Me sitting here right now, one of my knees is bent. And as soon as I straighten it out, it's going to feel like I got stabbed. Like, I could not imagine walking up to my bed let alone getting into this huge car accident. And she's wearing ankle booties with a little heel, walking along the desert? What? Maybe I just need to be more, that I for sure need to be more active. I do know that, and I can accept that on my own. But like, can we please be a little bit more realistic? So while they're doing that, they follow this van. The guy who's driving the van is in like a mariachi band performing at this quinceañera. And so then they're just like, let's just go to the quinceañera because why not? And so they go and are about to party it up and down. And Brooke and Kaylee are at this shaman, Angel de la Paz, which is like the angel of peace or something. Angel, I am not ethnic. I have no part of myself that can do accents or dialects, whatever. So I'm going to call her Angel. I feel like for everybody's sake, that's the best option. So Angel tells Kaylee that there's nothing she can do to help her get pregnant. And Brooke is like super pissy about it. And I'm like, honestly, she's telling the truth. She's not a doctor. If Kaylee has been to all these doctors and nobody can put a baby inside of her, Angel's not going to be able to by like talking to a god or 10. And that's the thing. Like, Angel's just being honest. And she's not trying to cheat anybody out of anything. And that's what I really respect. And it like, they make it kind of difficult in the beginning to like her, but you really should like her because she is really like, she's just trying to help people feel better and use whatever skills she has to help other people. But then she's like, Brooke, maybe like you and I should have a chat because you've got some issues. And Brooke's like, no thanks, because she doesn't really do emotions. And I feel that on a non-emotional level, because emotions are one of my least favorite inventions in the entire world. They're so uncomfy. And so they're like sitting in this little tent-ish thing, and Angel like stares right into Brooke's soul and is like, hey, you know, I know emotions are tough for you and it's much easier for you to feel angry than it is for you to feel sad. And she's like, I mean, you're right, but how did you know that? And Angel tells her like, hey, you need to take care of baby Brooke. Like, you need to take care of your little one because it's very easy for us to be hard on ourselves as adults. But on the inside, you're just, you know, your little self and you have to take care of it. So feel your emotions because baby Brooke shouldn't be upset and little Brooke shouldn't be going through these things. Yeah, so then Brooke gets hers. Her and Angel have an emotional and physical connection. And like, honestly, it is about damn time because she was wound up AF this whole movie. And then on the bus ride back, she legitimately is acting like she's on some type of drug. And it's interesting. So yeah, she gets hers and they fix it up. So they head back. They end up going to the airport because I guess everybody was supposed to be leaving today. So everyone's just on their way to the airport. And we head back to Wesley and Sean while they're at this quinceañera. And they're talking about, you know, life and everything. And she mentioned before how she's a guidance counselor, or she's supposed to be a guidance counselor if she could find a job. And he does architecture, but after his wife passed away, he took a leave of absence 2 years ago and just never went back. And my question is, do you not have bills? I mean, I totally get grief is shit, but I'm more so curious than judgy right now. You know, also to an extent, like, are you doing okay? Are you still able to get through life right now? But like, he's honestly like just doing the best he can. And aren't we all? So they get in the van that has all the luggage and they're going to the airport with the driver. And she shows Sean the email and he's like, listen, if I were you, I'd let him read it because this is you. Like, you can't keep lying about who you are to make this work when it's clearly already not working. And it's only been 4 weeks. So they start talking about like her relationship with Jared and he's like, well, what's like Jared's favorite thing about you? And she's like, well, he said, the one time that he really likes that I'm the only normal girl left in LA. And Sean's like, I've known you for 20 minutes. And there's, like, how did he get through 4 weeks of spending time with you? And he still thinks that you're normal. And they're both like, yeah, no, I'm for sure abnormal. That's a pretty evident staple of her personality, is she is nowhere close to normal. And he's like, well, why don't you, find somebody who likes that about you? And her response is, I don't even know if I like that about me. And when I tell you, Nasim stared into my soul with that, because there are certain words or phrases or points in a movie that, like, genuinely feel that they were written to be directed at me, and she put me the freak on blast for that. Because, like, if anybody, there's literally 2 people who listen to this, and both of them know me on a pretty deep level. So y'all know that, obviously, I know that, like, my personality is, like, very kind of, I wouldn't say, like, very extreme, but, like, it's very different. But, like, so that there are, like, people who, like that about me, but, like, do I like that about me? This is not what this podcast is for. I'm not trying to get emotional or anything like that. Things like that, in movies or in TV, I think kind of bring everything back to a different level, because you realize that the people who are involved in these kinds of things are also regular people. Like, that's something that I go through on a daily basis. And for people like Nasim and Lamorne and Anna Camp and all these people to kind of, like, obviously I don't know them in real life, but, like, their characters, like, everybody has these regular issues. I don't know. I feel like this is getting very, like, ranty or philosophical and psychological and in too much of a way. But I could genuinely print that out and have it plastered all over my wall, because do I even like that about me? But the answer is you should, Wesley. So anyway, so they get to the airport and they, like, are pretty much in love at this point. They're half a centimeter away from, like, making out right in the van, but then she's like, oh, well, I guess Jared's inside, so maybe I shouldn't. And so she gets out, she goes to meet up with him, and the whole time she is, like, just trying to waste time until she can pop these pills in his mouth and make him pass out so she can just delete the email. Like, she does not care about anything on the planet. She does not care if she ever gets a job if she can just delete this email. So they, like, run into her friends, and it's, like, super awkward because everybody's kind of mad at her at this point except Jared for the next 10 minutes, because then he gets, like, super mad at her. But so they run into each other in the airport and it's awkward. And she's like, okay, well, like, let's just go to our seats. So they're sitting on the plane, and something that her and Sean discussed before they fake crashed the Jeep is the, like, dinner party glance, where, like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then I honestly feel really bad for you, because it's kind of like a staple in any relationship, not even romantic, but just, like, friendship, where you're, like, out in public with somebody and you both notice something super, like, crazy or wild, and you make sure that you're both paying attention to it so that you can talk shit about it later. It's so satisfying to be able to complain about something with another person, because then that just, like, heightens your bond. So they're talking about that, and they both kind of agree that that's something fun that they like to do. So fast forward to, they're back on the plane, and I would genuinely rather talk about what this dolphin did versus talk about what this guy is doing on the plane. I can't do it. I will end up dry heaving. So he's doing something unmentionable. There's no nudity. It's not that kind of gross, or else I would actually probably talk about it. But he's doing something that nobody should ever do in public, let alone on an airplane, because you're stuck there. I'm gonna have to say it. Okay, he is sitting there. I don't even think that the plane has taken off at this point, and he's sitting there with cutting his freaking toenails. I want to die just thinking about it. Oh my God. Oh, okay. I just got full body chills. So he's sitting there and he's cutting his toenails, and she is obviously disturbed to her core, as she should be. And she's like, oh my God, Jared, look at this. Can we please talk about this later? And he's like, oh, what do you care? It's just feet. And I'm like, okay, no, I can't. And I think Wesley and I are both kind of at the same point, because that was the worst possible reaction he could have had to that situation. Are you not even momentarily disturbed by that man's actions? Because you're not a regular human being. So she's like, okay, honestly, this is it. I can't anymore. So she's like, Jared, I need to show you this. So she shows him the email, and automatically he's like, holy shit. And I mean, yeah, it's pretty rough. I'm not gonna lie. And it honestly is like really funny, because she's like, well, you need to, like me at my best and my worst. And this is, my worst. So I just need to show you my worst so that you can kind of like get on board with it. And she's like, well, see, like now we don't have to pretend to be perfect. Like, don't you want to get to know the real me? And he's like, no, the real you is psychotic. I want the perfect you that you had been pretending to be. And this sucks on both of their sides, because for Wesley, it's shitty that he's like basically saying, no, I don't care about your personality, get away. But also, she's been straight lying about her entire self for the past 4 weeks to this guy, and getting his hopes up and kind of like distorting his whole view of her. So like, he has every right to be pissed, but the story is framed from Wesley's point of view, so we're automatically inclined to side with her. So, but then he does also like kind of take it to a different level, because he's like, bye, like flight attendant, can you put her on a different seat? And she's like, okay, listen, I get that we're not friends right now, but you don't have to be mean. Like, you don't have to embarrass me in front of all these people. So she gets up and she has to sit next to the toenail guy. And I would have thrown myself off the plane before I sat next to that person. But yeah, she goes and sits next to him. They finish the flight. They get off. They're waiting for the baggage claim. Jared is legitimately acting like such a baby, because he's being wheeled past her and he turns his whole body away from her because he doesn't even want to look at her. I'm like, you're legitimately 2 years old. Like, stop being so dramatic. I understand why he's upset and why he's frustrated, but like, seriously, who acts like that? So he gets wheeled away into the abyss, and we never see or hear from him again. And Kaylee and Brooke resurface, and they start to have this whole conversation. It's honestly so shitty, because everybody's trying their best. Like, everybody is doing what they can, but it's just not working out. And so, like, Brooke and Kaylee are like, hey, just so you know, Kaylee's going to adopt a baby, and Brooke is getting a divorce. And Wesley's like, what the fuck? We were separated for like 5 hours. And they're like, well, yeah, because without you around for 5 hours, we could actually talk about and figure out our own problems. And they're basically like, well, when we talk to you about our problems, you act like they're not significant and that they don't matter and that they're not as important as yours. And Wes literally says, because they're not. And I'm like, girl, I know your life sucks right now, but you cannot tell, especially your best friends in the world, that their problems aren't something to concern themselves with. So like, she has some growing up to do, obviously, or there wouldn't be a movie at all. So like, she's got some things to figure out on her own. So they all kind of like take a break from each other. And Sean actually had recommended Wesley for a job at this new like charter school. And I'm actually very curious about this, because when she gets introduced to this guy who like owns and operates this charter school, he basically is saying, like, oh, well, we all have kids and we didn't like regular school, so we just made our own. And I'm like, is that honestly how schools work? Like, I obviously don't know. Though I've seen Accepted, so like I know that's, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that that's factually based, but they create a college in that. But is that like how you can just like make up a school? Like you and your parent friends all kind of just like join together and be like, hey, schools suck. Let's do it a good way. I don't know. I'm honestly flabbergasted. Maybe that's how California does things because they're more like free or I don't know out there. But yeah, so it's like a cool, like laid back, chill school environment. And they kind of have like a more realistic approach to things in life. And so it's very clearly a better fit for her than a Catholic school. So she interviews, she gets the job, she's their guidance counselor. And they do like a little montage of her being successful and talking to her students and stuff. So she gives her one student this whole speech about how like you shouldn't prioritize a guy because your friends are the only people who are going to be there like in and out for your entire life through all of the good and bad. And I'm like, wow, that's a very interesting lesson for you to try to teach somebody else. But I'm also glad that you also learned that lesson because you needed to. So after that, she goes to try and stalk Brooke and Kaylee, and her car's still fucked up because in the beginning, like a telephone pole, there was like a huge storm and a telephone pole fell on top of the roof of her car and it's just caved in still. I guess she never tried to get it fixed. I don't know. She was also in Mexico the whole time. So she's sitting outside of Kaylee's house pretending not to stalk her and like calls their phones and tries to like set up a time for them to like hang out or whatever. But then she sees that Kaylee's cat got out because he has a little black patch of fur on his nose that makes him look like what I prefer to describe him as is Charlie Chaplin without the hat, but they call him Hitler. Well, his name's Kevin, but they say he looks like Hitler because, I mean, he does. So she sees little Kevin running around and she's like, oh my God, I have to go see this cat. Like, that is Kaylee's cat. Let me go. Okay. Also, the outfit that she's wearing is like super cute, but who dresses like that? I mean, was it a work day? I'm assuming it had to be because, but then also, why are you not at work? A lot of these conversations I have with myself, I'm trying to figure out in real time. So like her outfit is super cute and I'm like loving the like pant top combo, and I have to take all my hats off to the costuming department or whoever picked these outfits, because throughout the entire movie I'm like, I want that, put me in that, she looks great in that. But I just like, nobody dresses like that in real life. Never have I ever seen somebody dress that cute for like a regular day. But it is a movie. I understand this is not just a regular day around the block. So she's running around Kaylee's backyard trying to catch the Hitler cat. And she like climbs a tree and then Kevin attacks her and they both fall down. And oh, these fucking eyelashes. My eyelashes only exist to poke my eyeball. Okay, I guess that's good enough for now. So Kaylee, her husband, Brooke, and this pregnant lady come out and they see the mistakes that Wesley's making and are trying to like kind of figure out what's happening. And Wesley's like, hey, you know, I've been a shit friend and I apologize. And Brooke and Kaylee are like, yeah. So then she starts explaining because Kevin the cat is kind of a dick. And she's like, I understand because like I'm Kevin. Like I can be a real asshole. I don't really deserve your love and affection. My life is kind of in shambles. But you're always there for me. And so they're like, oh, that's really cute. And so then she's like, Wesley says to this pregnant lady, like, oh my God, Kaylee and Tad are going to be the best parents and they're going to love your baby so much. And they're like, girl, we're not taking her baby. She is trying to sell our house. You went back to your regular job of making things weird. So, please quit while you're ahead. So she's like, oh, sorry. Like, I guess we won't take your baby. So they're like all BFFs now. They go back to the same bar where her and Sean met the first time, and he's sitting at a table by himself. So she like rolls on up and is like, "Oh my god, hey, haha. I was actually like stalking you on Instagram, so I found out that you were here." And she's like, "I probably shouldn't tell you that in person, but I mean, you've already seen every single one of my flaws at the same time. So seriously, what do I have to lose at this point?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're right." So they start like talking for a little bit, and then we find out that he's on another blind date with this girl, Ellen. Honestly, I feel so bad for Ellen. She deserves her own movie or show or just something to give her attention, put her life into a spotlight, because she's got issues and somebody needs to help fix them. So like her brother's missing, and her mom's basement flooded, which like is not that abnormal, but she goes about it and talks about it in a very casual sense. So Ellen rolls up and is like, "You know what, actually you guys should just like continue your conversation. I'm gonna go call my mom and sit by myself." So Wesley and Sean are left alone once again, and Wesley, puts herself out there, and she's like, "Hey, I had like a lot of fun hanging out. So what if we like do this thing, And Sean's like, no, thanks. Anyway. And Wesley's like, okay, bye." And then Ellen comes back, and they're like about to start their date again, and Wesley's like crying and leaves. And then Sean comes back, and I'm like, honestly, with the freaking tennis match of these two. And he's like, "Well, actually, I only said that because I was like scared of doing something long term, because he just wants to like casually." He thought that all he wanted to do was like casual stuff, but obviously his connection with Wesley is real. So he's like, "I was nervous about doing something like serious, but obviously I love you too. So yeah, let's do this thing." So they do. They fall in love. There are harps and quartets playing all around. And poor Ellen is on the phone with her mom saying like, no, the date's not going well because he's outside kissing another girl." And then that's it. So, yeah, I mentioned before at some point that I've seen it twice now. I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a fave, but I've also said in previous episodes that my standard to rewatch shows and movies is pretty low, because I will rewatch most things at least once. So to say that I rewatch something is not a huge statement, but I can for sure tell you that there are movies and shows that I didn't even get through the first time. So like, it's definitely worth a watch. It's the kind of thing that like you would want to be in the mood for. Like if you're having a chill night, maybe you're sipping some wine, or if you're gonna like dabble in like some sort of substance to chill yourself down, whatever the case may be. Or if you're like having like a girls' night, or if you and whatever significant other you have want to just like throw something on, I definitely recommend watching it at least once. It's funny. You'll get a couple laughs out of it. There are definitely good parts that make it worth watching. It's just probably not going to enter like my repertoire of consistent rewatches, if that makes sense, because I have like a specific list of movies that I will rewatch over and over and over without a second guess. And I've been told that that has a lot to do with my anxieties, so you're right about that. But yeah, I would definitely say watch it at least once. Nasim and Lamorne, honestly, can't go wrong with those two. And I guess that's probably it. I am on Twitter and Instagram if you care. If you think that anybody else would like to listen to this, I don't know why you would think that, but let them know. Let me know. I have some newfound free time, so if you have suggestions or requests of things for me to add to my list of stuff to talk about, send it my way. Other than that, I will catch you next time, probably. Okay. Bye.